This is the Albuquerque Business Podcast with your host, Jason Rigby. Each week, we interview leading local business leaders to inspire the vision and spirit that is in every entrepreneur, discussing strengths, weakness, strategies, systems, and the problems we can all solve together to fulfill a shared vision of a new future for Albuquerque.
Hi, my name is Jason Rigby, and welcome to the Albuquerque Business Podcast. Today on our show, we have a very special guest. I don't want to give it away, but we are going to be talking about contact lenses and having an abundance mentality in your business. This podcast has been brought to you by 99.9 The Beat FM. If you live in the Albuquerque area, tune in to 99.9 FM, or you can go to www.99thebeatfm. And also, we want to thank Duke City Marketing. They're the latest state-of-the-art digital marketing agency here in Albuquerque. And you can go to their website at www.dukecitymarketing.com. Well, today on the show, we have Lawrence Chavez. Hello, Lawrence. How are you?
Hello, Jason.
And he is the CEO of Everyday Contacts. And so I want to get into a little bit with you, if you don't mind, about contact lenses and then a little bit about yourself.
Okay. So Everyday Contacts is a new brand of contact lenses being launched from right here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And fundamentally, there's two unique things about what we're doing. Number one is a unique hydrophilic or wetting technology that we've developed to enhance the comfort of silicone hydrogel daily disposable lenses. And the other interesting part about that is a unique business model that is, I'm calling a hybrid direct consumer model. Take the best of the direct consumer elements of branding, customer experience, yet still working the eye care professional or the doctor into the value chain because we want to ensure good patient health.
Oh, perfect. I know everybody always asks me this, and so I wanted to ask you this. Are contact lenses safe for your eyes?
So yes, contact lenses are safe. They're also a medical device, so they have to go through clinical trials and FDA approvals, which we're doing currently. And yes, they are safe for your eyes.
Oh, okay, perfect. I know everybody talks to me about that. You know, I was at the gym and somebody's contact, and so they were talking about this, like, well, you wear glasses, that's probably safer, but ultimately we know contact lenses are safe. They've been proven
to be safe, and ultimately, back to my previous statement, shouldn't wear contact lenses unless you talk to an eye care professional about the contact lenses you're going to be putting in your eye.
And why would be the importance of making, because you were saying you go to the doctor and then the doctor orders, is there differences between, ordering them online compared to going to your doctor? Or?
Well, there are differences. So let's first talk about the differences in contact lenses. Number one, there's different materials. Even within the same material classes, there's different coatings, different sizes, different diameters. And so this is something that you're putting inside your eye. And, for me, that's uber critical in the fact that, scientists say that anywhere between 30 to 60% of our brain processing is visual. So why put something in your eye that might damage your vision?
Yeah, I could agree with that. And I know on your website you talked about the difference between, and you had mentioned it, coated silicone hydrogel contacts and then standard lens.
Yeah, so in our case, what we're talking about is standard lens. We're talking about a standard silicone hydrogel material. Essentially, at the core, silicone hydrogels are a combination of silicone and a hydrogel, which is, kind of the little gel beads you get that you put in your plants. That's a hydrogel material. Very high water moisture. But the silicone helps the lens breathe and allows oxygen to get to your cornea, and so it's good for health. The hydrogel is good for the wettability. The problem with the silicone is it's water repellent. It's what's caulking all the windows here, so it keeps water out. So lens companies do a lot of things to cover that effect of the silicone, and what we've developed is a simple wet applied methodology, which is cost effective to do, basically covers the effect of the silicone, providing that wettability and comfort for your eye.
Well, what caused you to get into, I know you're an entrepreneur, what caused you to get into a contact lens company?
So I will tell you, I am an entrepreneur. I've been all over the place. The technology that we're bringing to market was developed by a predecessor company that I co-founded about 8 years ago, which was a materials company, Advanced Materials, doing nanotechnology, both hydrophilic or water-loving or hydrophobic water repellent materials. And about 3 years ago, that company had developed this material for contact lenses. And so about a year ago, we decided to bring it to market ourselves by combining that with a contact lens, productizing it, and creating a go-to-market strategy for that product.
Oh, that's awesome. And Lawrence, are you from here originally, or?
Yes, I was born and raised here, actually probably about a mile from the studio.
Oh, wow.
But have lived in Texas and California as well.
I saw on your LinkedIn, you have a great LinkedIn page. I encourage everybody to go there. Can they just look up like Lawrence Chavez?
Yeah, Lawrence Chavez, and Lawrence T. Chavez, I think, is the
perfect.
LinkedIn. I think that's actually the LinkedIn account. So.
And what is your website for the contacts?
It's everydaycontacts.com.
Oh, okay, perfect. So, one of the things I saw on your website was talking about, and I think a lot of people get into that habit of maybe, and I've done, when I wear contact lenses, we run to Costco real quick, or we run to one of these places, we look at an optometrist, and then the whole idea is to hurry up and get that done, like prescriptions that way, if we could do it all online, we would. What are some of the benefits to making sure that you go to the optometrist and you go through the process and you get your contact lens from them?
Well, the benefit of getting the contact lens from them, and to be clear, the key element about going to the eye doctor is to ensure that the contact lens that you're getting is the right lens for you. There's different base curves, there's different diameters, there's different materials. A study done by one of the large contact lens manufacturers a few years ago said that consumers make the decision 94% of the time on which lens to use based upon a doctor's recommendation. And the reason being is, even within the contact lens market, the marketing material is so all over the place that when we have done customer discovery, i.e. talking to consumers, they don't know the difference between the different lenses. So getting that expert advice, making sure that the lens that they're putting in their eye is the right lens for them, that's what's important. And so we validate that. We believe that's important because ultimately we want to improve people's lives, and we believe the best way to do that is partner with a professional who can provide you the right counsel and advice.
That's awesome. So everybody that's out there, all you entrepreneurs that are out there and you haven't gone to the optometrist in years, it's time. This is a reminder.
Yes. Actually, I had, so I'm going to do a shout out for my eye doctor, Dr. Baumstark. I just use readers, I have to admit. So I don't need lenses. I don't need contacts.
Right.
So I kind of fall outside that zone. But it is something, eye health, is, as I mentioned to you, is very important, is particularly, as people use more electronic devices, the issues with myopia has been going up and ballooning as an issue in developed worlds. So the need for proper eye care is actually increasing as we start utilizing these devices that we didn't 100 years ago.
Yeah, and I can imagine. I know for me especially, having a digital marketing company, I'm on the screen in the morning. I'm on my phone all throughout the day, and then I go back to the screen at night. So the amount of times that I'm on the screen, the amount of hours in a day. So I can tell that already. I'm 45, and I haven't got the readers yet, but I got to take my glasses off and kind of do the whole paper with the arm out.
That means you need readers, by the way.
I know, yeah, I'm going to have to get some. I'm fighting that. So you were born and raised about a mile from here in the studio, and then did you go to college here? Or?
I went to New Mexico State University for undergraduate, and stayed in state. It's a great school. But yeah, I am a New Mexico native.
Oh, perfect. So I know you've had other companies in the past, or being an entrepreneur. What are some of the things that you're finding, especially here in Albuquerque and in New Mexico, some of the things that you've learned, some of the important things that you learned as far as being an entrepreneur?
So I think in New Mexico and everywhere, you need perseverance. I mean, that's ultimately as an entrepreneur. I was presenting at 1 Million Cups, which, for those of you who don't know 1 Million Cups, it's basically held weekly at Fat Pipe. It's a kind of an entrepreneurial event every Wednesday at 9 a.m. And somebody raised a question about, to be an entrepreneur, you need patience and perseverance. How do you get those? And I think everybody has to figure out a way to generate those for themselves as an entrepreneur, because you need both.
So you said it's because I've heard of this, and I don't know that much about it, and I want people that they're out there networking or whatever. So it's called Fat Pipe?
So the event is called 1 Million Cups. It's sponsored by the Kauffman Foundation. So this is an event that's community focused, and it's held at Fat Pipe, which is held basically in the library of the old Albuquerque High School. And it's a great community event for entrepreneurs to go out and showcase what they're doing. There's a number of people in the audience that are local entrepreneurs that can offer support, help. So it's just basically a friendly way to get feedback on your ideas and what you're working on.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I know we need more of that, I feel, here in Albuquerque, because a lot of business owners that I talk to, especially young entrepreneurs, they feel like they don't have support or nowhere to go. And I think having those type of associations that are out there and just being able to learn locally, I think that's important. I know in New Mexico, and I think this is something that people need to understand when you're starting a business, it's going to take longer than you think. It's going to cost double or triple more than you think. And what are some of the things that you've done in particular that has made you have that patience and perseverance?
So to be clear, I have no patience.
Most entrepreneurs don't.
So I have to get the patience from elsewhere. How do you deal with those things, those impatient times? Exercise is always great. Having a strong group of mentors and people that you can go to. I think the mentorship is something that it took me a long time. And what I mean a long time, wasn't really until my early 30s when I was like, all the smart people I know have mentors. And it didn't matter how old they were, they still had mentors.
That's good.
And so just finding people that you can talk to and get their ideas that have been there and had experience, it's a great thing. And I recommend that for any entrepreneur, any age, or not even an entrepreneur, anyone, get a mentor or two and somebody you can share the ideas that you're working through with.
Yeah, we're so segmented, especially, I think that's one of the bad things of the internet that's been out there is we feel we can get all the answers on the screen. And sitting down with somebody, I just had that. I just sat down with somebody for lunch and had a great conversation with them. And, I kind of played, I need to learn from this person and what can I learn from this situation?
And it's incredibly valuable. And, one of the things that we've been talking about at Everyday Contacts is we have a couple advisors. So number one, we have a medical advisory group, which is a phenomenal group. And we have a couple of strategy advisors. And we utilize them as one-off mentors. We have an issue. And we've been talking about how do we create them into a mentorship group or an advisory group that you get that cross-fertilization on ideas. Somebody says one thing, somebody else goes, oh yeah, that's a great idea, but what about this? And you have that dynamic interaction. And so we're thinking about adding somebody else to that mix and basically creating a group that we can meet with, whether it be virtually or in person, and have those discussions that become dynamic and things grow out of those experiences.
That's awesome. And I think more businesses, we get so stuck, especially if you're a smaller business, you become that anchor. You become the person, the go-to. You're the problem solver. A lot of times we don't, and then we take that burden on. And then we're not getting into expansion. We're not getting into, because we're just so focused on the day-to-day operations. What are one of the things that you do in particular to make sure that you're, we always hear this with E-Myth and, that book, which is, if you haven't read that book, it's amazing, where you're not working in the business as much, but you're working on the business.
Yeah, that's something that, people have been saying for quite a while. And I think that's important. I think there's a balance that needs to occur, particularly for an entrepreneur. I mean, a lot of times you're emptying the trash as well as working on strategy and sales and product. So you need to take time and step back. And one of the things I think that's important for a lot of entrepreneurs is to step back and get downtime, whether that's exercise or rest. It's odd that the times when ideas come to me, our chief operating officer says he wakes up at 2:00 in the morning, and some of the best emails he generates come at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and
right.
He's not thinking about it. It's just that idea is percolated through his mind, and I know a lot of people who do that, try to get away. Their mind will continue to work independent of whether they're really focused on that or not.
Yeah, for some reason, I don't know, it's weird, but showers. It's
Yes.
like, I think of so much. I don't know if it's just taking that 10-15 minute frame, but it's amazing. And you're exactly right. How many times have we been at the gym or on the treadmill or whatever, and then all of a sudden we get an idea, trying to grab your phone and email it to yourself.
Yeah, so you don't forget.
Yeah, exactly. Even on vacations I've done, it's like, okay, I'm not going to work. But then as you're reading a book, as you're sitting there, just like you said, that's an amazing, I think downtime, people don't understand what that means. It can be as much as taking an afternoon off.
Yeah.
Spending time with your wife or your children, going to a softball game. Those things, it's not just a duty that you have, but that helps you. If you're focused on the business, in projects, it dictates. You're starting something or there's a project, you may be in it for a week or two, but you have to, that's so important. And I thank you, Lawrence, for that advice. And everyone needs to hear that. You have to take time off. And if you're not, do it.
Yes, because your body will make you take the time off through illness or other reasons. And actually, there's some studies that show that. So.
Yeah, exactly. And you'll see that happen. I mean, I don't know how many times we've talked about this before, but entrepreneurs are running through drive-thrus, getting fast food. The health becomes, and as you get older, then it becomes important, but then you've built a fortune, as they said, and then you have to pay a fortune to get your health back.
That's right.
Yeah, it's sad. Well, as far as here in New Mexico, you've been here, you understand it. As far as your life, what are some of the things that, like, a new entrepreneur is coming out, maybe they're in their 30s, what's been different than you imagine being in business?
First, I want to correct something that you said. I've been from New Mexico, but I still don't understand it. So I don't know. I think each entrepreneur has to figure out their own path, because every entrepreneur has their own strengths. Mm-hmm. And so that's one of the things that there are some entrepreneurs who are extremely good on the technical side of things, and what they need to shore up is their managerial skill or their strategy skill. Whereas there's some people who are good, big, high-level thinkers, but they have to think about, how do I get a little closer and manage the relationships that I have, so I can make sure that I'm not bypassing those. Because that's one of the things that a lot of visionary people do, is that they basically have these grand visions and they walk past the people that they're working with, and they forget to nurture those relationships. So that journey, I think, is individual for each entrepreneur, and that's why I think the mentorship is so important. Is you got to find those mentors to help you recognize and fill those holes in your strategy in life.
And I think a lot of entrepreneurs are, like you said, visionaries, and they don't focus on the systems that have to be in place every day.
Yeah.
And that's, for me, that's one of the hardest things in developing those. But once you develop them and you have that system in place, if it's a good system, it runs itself.
Yes. And it comes back to people as well.
Right.
Getting the right people around you to help you out.
Yeah, exactly. And that's something we'll talk about in a little bit. As far as, like, your business future as Everyday Contact, what does the future hold in that? And not just here in New Mexico, but because I'd imagine you'd want to be not just United States, but international.
Yeah, so ultimately, the strategy for Everyday Contacts is, as I mentioned to you, we have to finish our clinical trial and get FDA approval. People say FDA approval, that's an enormous process. What we're doing, it's a daily disposable lens, so it's a Class 2 device. It's much like a pregnancy test or a hearing aid. So the threshold, even though it's a medical device going in your eye, it's a daily disposable, so it's not sitting in there for an enormous amount of time. So the approval time is much shorter than most people think about when they think about FDA. But we want to get that approval, and our goal is to be in the market by the end of the year.
Oh, this year?
Yes.
Oh, awesome.
And then we're working on securing beta and launch sites. These doctors that we can work with who have bought into what we're doing, not only the lens, but also the business model, so that we have a core group of practices that we can work with as we launch, refine both our messaging, the business processes, and so we can grow next year as we continue to roll out the product.
Is most of your marketing going to be like B2B, like it's going to go to the doctors?
The way I describe it is kind of like a slider. If you think about one side of that is the B2B to the doctor. The other side of that is the consumer. We'll be more heavily focused on the doctor, but we still need to have a very strong consumer-focused brand, very clear messaging, good product support, even if we're not spending a whole lot of money to reach the consumer initially.
Right.
And then over time, that slider will move, where we'll move to start adding more to the consumer marketing so that we can help drive additional patients back to the doctor.
Yeah, because the doctor would pretty much be the evangelist.
Correct.
Yeah, and then I don't know that much about optometry, but I know you have the people that are below the doctor that actually help you put the contact lens in and stuff like that. They would probably be your best asset.
They have a large support network within the eye care office. The doctor sees you, the optician follows on, or the contact lens specialist, depending on whether you're getting glasses or contact lenses. And they have a fairly well developed system on how they go down the value chain to ensure you're getting what you need. So.
Oh, that's awesome. One of the things that I want to talk about, and we'll get into it a little bit now, and then we're going to take a break here in a few minutes, but I kind of want to start in it now because I think it's probably going to be after the break I want to get into a little bit more. You wrote an article on LinkedIn. I encourage everybody to read it. It's called, "Will ABQ Ever Break the Barriers?" And I want you to kind of talk about it kind of briefly right now, and then we'll go to break. I want to delve into it. I have some points here that I feel like is extremely important, and I think it's very insightful for the future of our city here.
The genesis of the article, and I think the "Will ABQ Ever Break the Barriers" was the title of the article I was commenting on. So there was an article in the journal about Denver and all the growth that they had seen in their entrepreneurial and startup community, and talking to some people from Albuquerque that actually had moved up to Denver. And somebody, one of my LinkedIn friends, had sent me a note because we had had this discussion previously about Albuquerque. And he sent me a note, "Will Albuquerque ever break the barriers?" And so the response was my response to his generic question on that. And the premise that I took is that New Mexico and Albuquerque are very different than our neighbors. And part of the problem that we have in New Mexico is we seem to think that we are competing within and amongst ourselves, when in reality, in the business world, we're competing with our neighbors around us. We're competing with Arizona, we're competing with Colorado, we're competing with Texas, Nevada. I mean, we saw that a few years ago when Tesla was trying to find their battery plant. They were looking at all these different states, and we were competing with all of them, what we had to offer. And so it was my response to some of the mindset problems and challenges that we have here, and some theories, again, these are my theories, on how we got to where we are. And I think part of that was based upon, again, I'm a New Mexico native, so I feel this. In some respects, I fight against this, is we grew up as a culture and a political system heavily dependent upon the systems that we incorporated from Spain and Mexico. And so at that point in time, there was scarcity. If there was water available, either I had access to the water hole or you had access to the water hole. And so if you did better, then it meant that I did worse. Whereas all of our surrounding states, Texas with the oil boom, Colorado with the gold rush in the mid 1800s, 1850s is what I meant to say. And then nobody ever lived in Arizona until they had electricity and air conditioning.
Exactly.
So the systems that grew up in these places grew up in terms of abundance. People were coming for opportunity rather than, the system being built up around the scarcity. And so we have a scarcity mentality in New Mexico. And I see that almost daily. I see it in myself, and I fight to overcome it. And I think we need to change that mentality if we want to compete not only globally, but even regionally.
We're going to take a break. I encourage everyone, go to LinkedIn and type in, will ABQ ever break the barriers? I shared it today on LinkedIn. I encourage you to do that. Hashtag abundance mentality. I want this article to get out there because I think this is the main issue that we're facing here in our state. And we're going to get that right after the break.
Join us this week for another episode of the Albuquerque Business Podcast with your host, Jason Rigby. Each week, he interviews leading local business leaders that inspire the vision and spirit in every entrepreneur, discussing strengths, weakness, strategies, systems, and the problems we can all solve together to fulfill a shared vision of a new future for Albuquerque. Listen or download this Sunday afternoon at 4 from your favorite podcasting app.
And we're back from our break. We're with the CEO, Lawrence Chavez of Everyday Contacts. And he wrote an article on LinkedIn called, and I encourage you to go read it, it's amazing. It's called, Will ABQ Ever Break the Barriers? And you just mentioned a little bit about it. And I kind of want to go into the abundance mentality in business, Lawrence. And if you could, you talk about that with the scarcity mentality, you just mentioned that. Could you go a little bit more into that?
So the abundance mentality, functionally, that everything's not a zero-sum game. Our world's a good proof point of this. So if you think about, very simply, you have a horse that used to plow up a field and now you have a mechanical device that can do that, the amount of resources that are needed to generate the same level of plowing is significantly less. So you actually can grow the productivity of that field, and that extends almost everything in our lives, just the communication. So as a quick side note, and I didn't think I'd be saying this, but our cell phones. When I was in college, I went down to Mexico for 6 weeks in my grad school. My wife was here, and in order for me to call her up, it was $4 a minute. So we talked for a good 2 or 3 minutes and say our goodbyes. Where now you have a cell phone that can dial, and the efficiency of that, and just the ability to generate more communication,
right,
more business. Things can happen now that there was a transaction cost to that happening. That transaction cost, now that it's removed, doesn't mean that the telecom companies are doing any worse. Actually, they're doing much better. They're generating revenue elsewhere from other things. But a lot more stuff is happening because those barriers have been removed.
Yeah, and you can see, we have FaceTime, where you can actually have video, where you could go, if you have Wi-Fi, you could talk for hours.
Yeah, no costs.
Yeah, and that's amazing to me. Like New Mexico, for instance, with the scarcity and abundance, business owners or people that may have been here a while in businesses, how does that mentality translate locally?
Well, you probably have to ask them. What I've seen is just this mindset that there's only so many opportunities, and if somebody else gets an opportunity, that means less of an opportunity for me. Oddly enough, and I think they're doing the right thing, so I'm going to get into some stuff the city has done. Recently, the city's now starting to do programs where they're going to local businesses, ensuring that local businesses get the bid for certain things.
That's awesome.
So while I think that's good, it's also reflective of the scarcity mentality. why can't we as business people start competing everywhere else? And again, that goes back to the mindset. Why do we have to focus on here? Why can't we compete good enough to be able to compete regionally and outcompete those other companies out there?
Yeah, I mean, how many Arizona companies do we have working on our highways?
Yeah, and so we need to up our game because there's a reason that, those companies won, and those companies won because they were offering something, a price point, a service that was good. Actually, and I'm not going to disclose who this person is, I through a friend, had coffee with, I actually had ran into a friend of mine. So he invited me to sit down with this other business person. And this business person had basically an infrastructure type business. I won't go into too much detail. But he was saying he does so well in New Mexico just because he shows up. He said if his business was anywhere else in the country, he wouldn't be able to compete. And it really surprised me. It was very reflective of the fact that so many businesses don't even show up. We need to up our game and we need to compete. And I'm going to be unapologetic about that because I think we're just so scared about, losing what we have rather than focusing on, there's a bigger pie out there and we have an opportunity to gain access to that.
I agree 100% on the digital marketing side. Everyone here is about 10 or 15 years behind. You can see that. People are just now starting to get into Facebook ads, which were, years and years ago. Facebook's kind of like older generation now, and everybody's into Snapchat and Instagram. I understand that, and I think that's 100%. And like you said, the city's going and making sure that they get these bids, but it still doesn't help the mentality of the business owner.
Correct. And I think it's good that we're doing that because we need to support our community.
Right.
But that being said, is the way you truly grow an economy isn't by that. It's by exporting elsewhere. And if you look at the growth economies, regionally or anywhere else, you mentioned you're from Seattle. Seattle grew exponentially once Microsoft started going there.
Right.
And then because Microsoft was there, other companies started co-locating there, Amazon, and all of that was export. It went elsewhere. They were generating revenue elsewhere, and those funds came back to the community. It allows them to import from elsewhere. We need to focus not just internally, but the abundance mindset is that we can grow businesses here that can start exporting our products, services, whatever it is outside of our community, and that helps everybody here.
Yeah, because it's sad to see these businesses that are doing bids here wanting to come here, offering, I think the Tesla factory, you brought that one up, it was $18 to $30 an hour jobs.
Yeah. And, those type of things, help us out. So the thing we talked earlier about the whole Netflix thing, and the nice thing about Netflix is that's an exported product. So those are things that are created here that then get exported out. And so the jobs that it creates, high value jobs that, again, I believe other industries will develop around to support, or there'll be people that, work for them for a while and they'll go, hey, I have a great idea for this design house or this production house, and create their own businesses. So I think those type of things are the things we need to encourage, but we also need to encourage those that grow here in New Mexico so we can create our own businesses, and there's no reason that can't occur.
Yeah, I got a neat story with Netflix. I haven't told this one yet. There's a person in Belen I met, and Netflix came to him. He had bees. They came to him and said, we need to use your bees in filming. And he goes, okay. And then they said, do you know somebody who has tarantulas? We need to use spiders and stuff like that in our filming here in Albuquerque. And he goes, no, but I'll get some. He's like, he's thinking, if I go get these, and then they're like, can you get an alligator? He has an alligator on his property in Belen. He has an ostrich now. And then he ended up petitioning the state, and he's got a zoo license. So he has a zebra. He has a bunch of different types of dogs. They like different types of dogs in their TV shows and movies. And I think he has about 20 or 30 animals now.
That's impressive. And it's just somebody who said, I can solve a problem that somebody else has, which is fundamentally what you do as an entrepreneur. So
yeah, and I love that. It's kind of a silly story, but I love that because that's the mentality that's that abundance mentality that we have to have here with business. One of the things that you talked about with Arizona, Texas, and Colorado and their business climate, can you go a little bit into that? I know you've been in Texas before. What would you see the differences in the business climate between the states?
Some of this is opinion. I have some experience, but not a wealth of experience. So there's other people who might have deeper levels of experience. But I think fundamentally the difference is in the combination of the mindset that we talked about, the access to talent, access to resources, capital, other things that are needed for a business, and just the climate of the community welcoming them. For example, in Colorado, there's a very large startup community that really has just only developed in the past 20 years. But part of that is the welcomingness of the community, the broader community. So to be clear, we have a great entrepreneurial community here in New Mexico. Relatively small community relative to the rest of the state, but I would love to see the rest of the state rally around that community and provide the support and infrastructure that they need to be able to do and grow the businesses here.
And I love what you had pointed out in your article about the federal government and the funding.
Yeah, so the federal government funding, per capita, we get more federal funding than anywhere else, and primarily because of the national laboratories, and we have a lot of federal lands here, which I think we've become dependent on. And part of that is that money comes in from elsewhere, and so we're not generating it ourselves. We're not generating the resources that we need to grow, and oftentimes those technologies or the things that are being developed, particularly in the national labs, we never see them here either. There is some tech transfer, fairly limited relative to the budget, that could come out, but that comes in somewhat in a vacuum. The work gets done, and then that work goes elsewhere, and we never see the benefit of it. And it's different than the exporting, where you have this constant flow of production and goods, repeat customers. It has a different multiplier effect. So I think we've become very dependent on federal dollars, and I think we need to change our mindset on that and diversify our economy into other industries and other areas that we can generate, high value returns for community.
Yeah, and I think mediocrity can set in so quickly. I mean, not just in a state, but in a business, and if we get used to something, I don't know how many people's gotten used to a contract that they've had, and then that contract goes away, and next thing you know, they're filing Chapter 11. I see it all the time, in the paper, Albuquerque Business First magazine. And it's sad to see that mentality. And like I said, when you switch that little switch, and I encourage you to Google this, but when you make that switch from scarcity to abundance, it will transform your life.
It really does. And one of the things that we have a lot of here, which is kind of an offshoot of all of our dependence, is we have a lot of bright technologists who are reliant on federal grants, but they become too reliant on federal grants and never end up commercializing whatever the projects they're working on, because they're chasing the next grant or the next proposal, rather than thinking, really, what is the customer problem that I'm solving, and how can I sell this to a customer? So there's a lot of, and there's even a term for it, SBIR shops, where these are people who are doing small business innovation research grants, is what they are. A lot of people who are getting these, and there are some of them, so I don't want to toss a broad blanket, who do a very good job of taking these grants, finding commercial value to these products, and then turning around developing businesses around them. But there's also a lot of them that have developed into high dollar research tools that don't generate any substantial business or any substantial opportunity, because they're always chasing that next dollar.
Yeah, that's sad, because their end goal is to get the grant money.
Correct.
And not look at it in the sense of saying, how can I benefit a customer, whether it's local or national, whatever, international. Yeah, that's really sad. I've seen that. I mean, that'll take you down a dark road.
Yeah. And I don't want to dwell on this negativity too much. I think it's a fundamental challenge that we have, but there's some really great startups here that are doing some really cool things, that are receiving funding, getting customers, growing their businesses in such a way that will ultimately help our community. And there's a lot of people that have an abundance mindset, that aren't zero-sum dollar people, that are developing really cool businesses that will impact New Mexico and even the nation. So it's not just New Mexico based.
Yeah, and I don't think I've ever mentioned this, but we were talking off air before we started. Where I come from in the Seattle area, Tacoma, Washington, 15 years ago. It's cool there. You can go there now. They have a glass museum that's state of the art. They have the LeMay, the guy that he has the largest museum for classic cars, warehouses of classic cars. But if you go there, it's an amazing looking city. A lot of people go there. They'll walk around downtown. There's amazing restaurants, breweries, all of that. But 15 years ago, no one would walk downtown. It was horrific. You would literally experience a crime. Apartments started coming in there, and you had some visionaries that came in there and started changing things. It was on a waterfront area, so they said, why aren't we capitalizing on that? And I think it just takes people that are visionary, entrepreneurs that go out there and say, how can we invest, not just look for a dollar, but how can we take our time and invest in the local strategies that will, because ultimately it will help your business.
Ultimately will help your business. And I think there's a lot of people in New Mexico, and the mind shift is changing. So again, I want to reiterate, the article was in response to a question posed to me about why we were at. I believe this is also generational, which is why I'm a strong supporter of education, entrepreneurial education for our students. Again, it's not the idea that we should make our students entrepreneurs. It's the idea that they should be exposed to creative thinking about problem solving, which basically changes the way things are done. Because it's generational, we provide those tools and those resources to our children of our community, and later on they can go on and they can make an impact, not just for us, but for other people.
Yeah, it's amazing to me how many school trips have children gone to the Google, or gone out to San Francisco, gone to these different areas, and it just changed their perspective for life. They get inspired, and next thing you know, they're 22 years old and, have an amazing, we've been talking a lot about tech, but, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Somebody can get inspired. You'll be surprised, and I think that's why mentors are so important. You'd be surprised what you can do and the impact that you can have in helping someone, especially in those age groups, seniors in high school, and that's why it's so important. I love the marketing. I'm on the marketing side. And I want to shout out to the digital marketing professor there at UNM, John Benavides. He does such a great job in mentoring those students and getting them understanding and knowing that, yes, this is where we're going, and opening their mindset and creating that vision that, you can start something. You can do this.
Yes.
It's not above you. You have that ability to be able to. It's not just for that 10% of people that are geniuses elsewhere, but you have that mindset here, sitting in that school here in Albuquerque.
Agreed. And I think one of the biggest challenges that our schools, that our mid and high school students have here, is a limitation on what they think is possible.
Right.
And I think that's part of the community that we've grown up. It's part of what we're exposing them to. And the more opportunities that we expose them to, and the more capability, when they say, I can see myself doing that, and there are some tools and resources available to them to do that, that just changes their mindset. I mean, I tell the story that I went to Manzano High School here, again, which is
right here.
Right here. But although I think I had an entrepreneurial spirit, an entrepreneurial mindset, I had no clue what an entrepreneur was. My father worked at Sandia National Laboratories, wanted me to become an engineer. He's still disappointed, by the way, that I didn't become an engineer. But the idea of becoming an entrepreneur, just the people that I knew were entrepreneurs that were, their parents, owned small businesses. And so the idea of what that was and the opportunity that exists, I had to be exposed to, despite my mindset and despite my wanting to do that. And I think that that's changing. There's opportunities to expose our kids to that. And I would love to see more school programs that do that.
Yeah, and I think that's so important. And if you're a teacher out there and you're listening to this, never forget that you are their mentor and you have that ability. I can remember, when I was in the Marine Corps, I can remember a drill instructor yelling at me, and then he pulled me to the side and said, we're here to make you. He's like, there are so many Marines that are out there that are millionaires and successful. He's like, the discipline that you're learning right now, it will, serve you for the rest of your life.
Yes.
And I'll always remember that. So one of the things, because we talked a lot about the negative part of the article, but some of the positive things that you did, especially at the end of the article, like I said, I encourage everybody to read it, is us together as entrepreneurs supporting groups of change. And you mentioned a bunch in there. Can you go a little bit into that?
Yes. So there are a lot of organizations here that have an impact on our community. So for example, and I'll use an example of support. So there's an organization here called ABQID, which is a business accelerator that's putting on a program for software accelerate. I'm going to butcher the thing. You can go to abqid.com, but it's basically an accelerator program they're putting on, and I'm going to support by doing a session in April with them. And entrepreneurs in the community need to pitch in to do those, and I think a lot of them do, whether it's that or other things. A lot of the entrepreneurs in the community do that, and there's things like that we can do to give back. Talked about 1 million cups. There's actually an event down at the Rainforest, which is the building on the corner of Broadway and Central tonight, that's going to have venture capitalists there, and people can go meet the venture capitalists. So there's a lot of these programs for entrepreneurs to be part of, and I encourage entrepreneurs to get involved in those. We were also talking about things you can do with the education system. So I think it's been about a year and a half. I've been involved with an organization called Startup Teen that was doing startup education boot camps for teenagers, and Bosque School helped do a lot of that as well. So we were putting on one of these startup weekend programs for teenagers, and this woman came in who was a teacher at Jimmy Carter Middle School. And so she wanted to do a Shark Tank for her kids. And
that's awesome.
so I put her in touch with my daughter, who actually started the startup team, and another local entrepreneur to help judge the event. But this teacher, who had no business experience, decided this was a great idea and did all the legwork and allowed the kids to go through and create their own businesses ideas. And there's things like that the teachers can do, that anybody can do. And then if you want to tap me on LinkedIn or you go to ABQ Idea, there's a wealth of entrepreneurs here who want to give back, who will help pitch in. Like I said, there was a couple entrepreneurs who went to judge that program that took a morning to do that. I think we just need to build and encourage those type of programs in an opportunity to grow our community.
Yeah, and it's not just, entrepreneurs I talk to, they're like, with these organizations are asking for money. It's more than that. It's they would rather have your time than your money. So being able to take that opportunity to volunteer and help, and you're going to get, we always say this, but we don't take the time to do it. We always get more out of it than the people that we are actually helping.
Well, I would agree. I mean, there's, again, a lot of scientific data that shows that those who give to charity or donate their time to charity get far more out of it than what they're giving up.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's exactly right. And then the last thing on your article, and then we'll move on, is elevate leaders with vision. You had mentioned that statement that we need to elevate leaders with vision. What do you mean about that?
So what I mean by that is we have a tendency, again, to the scarcity mindset, is leaders with vision sometimes we dismiss, whereas sometimes in other communities they're embraced because they're more open to things. So we need to think about new ways to do things, and there's a lot of smart people who have strong visions. I can think of a number of entrepreneurs who have these great ideas that we need to support, and we need to elevate them, not in a hero worship type of way, but in a way to demonstrate, again, back to the community that this can be done. We have had successful entrepreneurs who have turned around and sold their businesses for large dollars to other businesses. And you rarely see them being, talked about in the community. And we need to show that it can be done, and we need to elevate those people and pat them on the back and say, look, here's an example of how it can be done. The more we do that, the more we demonstrate to the community that it's possible. Mm-hmm. And that those things are good for our community, because they're successful. It doesn't mean somebody else is less successful now.
Right, exactly. And embrace it instead of fight it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's important. One of the things that I always ask every guest that's on here, because I think it's so important, are there any tools or books that have really helped you on your entrepreneurial journey?
The tools I mentioned to you are, number one, mentors, counselors, friends that you can talk to about different things. I won't rehash that, but again, are important. And if you did nothing else, I think that would be, at least for me, that's 80% of it. There's one book that I recently read, actually was kind of the, I don't want to say the genesis, but one of those platforms that I thought through everyday contacts, was a book called The 7 Powers, Foundations of Business Strategy. And basically the idea of the book was that there's really only 7 powers that a business can have. And so in mapping the framework of what we're doing for everyday contacts, I mapped it over those 7 powers. How can we garner these powers? And again, not all of them can you get, actually only 2 of them that can you get as a startup business. And that the power is a unique business model. And then the other power is a cornered resource or something that's unique. And so for us, the unique business model is the business model that is the hybrid direct consumer element. And then the cornered resource is the technology that we have developed that's unique. It's pending technology. So there's these elements, but there's 5 other strategies that you can garner as a business as you grow. And so it was one of those books that really was impactful for me as we thought about the creation of everyday contacts.
Oh, that's awesome. And the name of the book again was?
The 7 Powers, The Foundations of Business Strategy, and it's by a guy named Hamilton Helmer.
Oh, okay. Awesome.
So,
yeah, well, I'll put that in the show notes for you guys.
Then the other book is The Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz.
Yes, I've read that one. That's a great book. Yeah.
And the reason I like that book so much is, particularly we build up the startup thing about, it's fun, it's a great experience. It's a really hard thing to do. And so the book really talks about, the struggles that he had starting his business. Now he's a very successful venture capitalist, but the struggles that he had and the hard things about creating the business that he created in the 90s. And, trying to create a business is extremely hard, particularly, a startup business where you have to develop this technology, then work on approvals and validation. And so there's a lot of highs and lows associated with that. And so that was a great book for any entrepreneur to really grasp with those highs and lows you have to deal with when you're going through those things.
Yeah, I think if you can read that book and then become self-aware of those,
yes,
the sting is not as much when it happens.
Yeah.
Because it's not if it's going to happen, it's going to happen.
It's going to happen. And that's the other reason where mentors come in board, because particularly if they've gone through it, they've been there, they can tamp down, lift you up when you're low and bring you back to reality sometimes when you're really high. So
yeah, exactly. I don't know how many times I've seen it where people have called me and been emotional and, my business is done. I can't believe this. It's just, okay, well, what happened? What was the process? How did this, and then going through that. And then those emotions start subsiding and the logic takes over again. And then you realize, okay, yeah, I've had a setback.
Yes.
But what can I do and sometimes setbacks can be great.
They allow you to rethink and refocus. So.
Yeah, I don't know how many businesses from a setback has turned around and flourished.
Yes.
After that, because they did take the time to sit down and restructure and go through. So we're almost done here. We're short of time. I love having you, Lawrence. I want to ask you one more question, if you don't mind. What are you doing right now to ensure your business continues to grow and develop as a business owner?
Well, that's it. I don't want to say it's a tough one, but there's about 20 things that I'm trying to do. I think ultimately it comes back to focusing on the core things and then having trust in your team to handle the other things that they're responsible for. We didn't talk a lot about it, but team is incredibly important. Mm-hmm. Being able to trust in your team and the things that they're doing and enhancing and encouraging that communication. So for me, I think the things that I'm leaning on is to focus on the core outcome. And again, the idea of the 7 Powers book was one of those things, is how do we ensure that we can hit the milestones that we need to hit in order to achieve our goals, but also on the back end, how do we build up our team and build up our network and our advisors and our customers in such a way that allow us to accomplish those goals as well.
Yeah, I want to just talk about that real quickly. I know we have to go, but trust with team members. You just mentioned that word, and I think there's a book, I think Stephen Covey's son wrote it. It's called The Speed of Trust. Yeah, exactly. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Trust is, again, one of these things that's a barrier to abundance.
Right.
So the idea of trust is just the validation that that somebody's going to do the right thing. Mm-hmm. And even if they don't do the right thing, that they're doing what they believe to be right. And you can trust that their intentions are good.
Right.
And oftentimes that's a challenge for entrepreneurs as well, is it's okay for people to make mistakes, because obviously as entrepreneurs, you make mistakes, I make mistakes, mm-hmm. I make a lot of them.
Right.
And if someone's making a mistake that's based upon malice, then that's a problem.
Right.
If someone makes a mistake, but they're trying to accomplish the goal that you've worked together to set, you need to be willing to accept that mistake. Maybe
they're not against you.
Yeah, maybe you need to help nurture them, maybe correct them, maybe ensure communication. And unfortunately, oftentimes that's my problem. And the reason I say it's my problem is because sometimes I haven't clearly articulated mm-hmm. what I wanted accomplished. And so I have to look at myself and say, where do I bear responsibility in this? So trust is incredibly important, and ensuring that you have the right people around you that you can trust. And then, letting them do their thing.
I have the same problem too, exactly. I do not clearly communicate in an email. Here lately, I've been doing video emails because I can articulate better if I just talk instead of trying to type it all out. There's free programs out there, Chrome extensions, and I actually just sit there and record myself, or I'll do a screen share where I'm recording and I kind of show things, because that's way easier for me to do that than actually take an email. Because the problem I get is I'm moving so fast and my brain is so far ahead that I don't take the time to sit there and articulate what I had thought when I was in that meeting. And so I'm just doing like big, broad brushstroke, but I need them to do the details, and I'm not explaining how I want those details done on their end. So in turn, I get a product that's not what I had envisioned, but it's not their fault, because they didn't, like you said, I think that's a great word, they didn't do it with malice.
Yeah.
They just didn't have proper leadership.
Correct.
And that's my fault. It's 110% my fault. And that's something that I think as entrepreneurs, what Lawrence just said is so important. We want to be like the mom, the mom chicken that hoards all the, and it's our business and we created this and we poured our blood, sweat, and tears into this business. And the minute that somebody makes a mistake, we want to take them and exile them and throw them on a cross or whatever. You know, it's horrific. A lot of times I've seen this over and over and over again, especially with business partners.
Yes. You know, there was a great post on LinkedIn. I couldn't even tell you who did it, but one of my connections shared it. But it involved about not caring who got credit for something as well.
Right.
And I think that's one of the other things about abundance as well, is you need to understand that you don't have to get credit. And you don't have to point fingers either.
Right.
So you can do both. You can share the credit and you can help nurture people rather than point out their flaws.
Yeah, and that's the abundance mentality. Yeah. And that's something I've had to learn over time is if I can give credit, whether it's even deserved, if I can give credit to somebody else instead of criticize them, a lot of times they'll live up to that expectation of the credit that I've gave them.
Yes.
I've had to learn that. You know, I read a book with John Maxwell, Great Leadership. He's wrote a ton of books. And one of the things that stuck with me in one of his books was he got poor service from somebody that she was either off or whatever, but a waitress. And he just went ahead and tipped her really big. And then she followed him out the parking lot and was crying and said, you know, she was sorry and all that. But he's like, I know you're having a bad day. It's not a big deal. And I know I want you to understand this and see this, and you can help other people, you know, in your service. But that's what we're all called to do, is serve.
Yes.
You know, I mean, as an entrepreneur, as a leader, if you haven't read any servant leadership book, it's not about you.
It's not. Again, a friend of mine, he's like, he was reading a book, and I can't remember the book, but he said, you know, the core premise of the book is that my job is to love those people within 30 feet of me. And it was an interesting perspective, and in trying to put that in practice, it's not as easy as you think.
Right.
And people are going through different things, and it's hard to step back sometimes and realize that person who, you know, made that snide comment, you don't know what they're going through.
Right,
or,
exactly.
Remembering that you shouldn't make a snide comment because you've had a hard day, or, you know, be snippy or whatever the case may be. And that's not easy. So to be clear, I can be snippy sometimes. So,
but we've all made that where we put our foot in our mouth when somebody, I mean, I had it recently. I had a lady I was talking to, and I was kind of being, and then she had a family member that was passing. You know, her mind is not there. She needs to take time off. She needs to be able to be free and go. It was out of state. She needs to go, you know, and spend time. She's not thinking about my selfish project.
Yes.
You know, that I want to accomplish today. And if I would have coached and asked the right questions and been there, I would have known and saw that. I was reading a book just a couple days ago, and they were talking about this company. This man, he had a heart attack during a sales meeting. And so he went to the hospital, and then he ended up passing away that afternoon. And so everybody kind of came to the hospital. There was like 5 or 6 in the meeting. They came, and then the doctors were asking them who to contact. And all 6 people that had worked with him for 20 years did not know who to contact.
Oh, wow.
That's the type of culture you do not want.
That is scary.
In your business, yeah. I mean, it just had been all about performance and results, and they didn't ever get a chance to really get to know each other enough to the point to where they had his wife's cell number, had gone out for drinks or dinner or coffee or whatever. And I think that's so important to do things like that. Take the time, take your employees out, take the time to take them to lunch, let them talk. Yeah. You know, I think all those things. Well, Lawrence, it's been great having you today. I really appreciate. I know we got a little bit into contact lens. What's your website again?
So it's everydaycontacts.com.
And I encourage everybody to go to LinkedIn and read that article. I think it's one of the underlying keys for our city here. It's called Will ABQ Ever Break the Barriers? You can just search it right on LinkedIn. It's called Will ABQ Ever Break the Barriers? That's all for today's episode of Albuquerque Business Podcast. Please subscribe to the podcast. We're on iTunes, Spotify. I have put it on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and never miss an episode. And stop by our new website. It's abqpodcast.com. That's abqpodcast.com. You can also on 99.9 The Beat FM. You can hear it on Sundays from 4 to 5 p.m. Thanks, guys. Have a great day.
Thank you for joining us on the Albuquerque Business Podcast. And thank you to our sponsor, DukeCityMarketing.com. Please go to abqpodcast.com, where you can get show notes, resources, and links to everything we talked about today to help you navigate your journey as an entrepreneur and business owner in Albuquerque.